This episode is brought to you by the Arvada Center. Getting Away with Murder has never been this much fun. A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder is a musical comedy about just how far one poor clerk named Monty will go to claim his inheritance. Running March 28th through May 11th at the Arvada Center, you can get your tickets now for this Tony Award-winning musical. Just go to arvadacenter.org. That's arvadacenter.org. I'm calling Nana. This episode is brought to you by the Port Aransas Chamber of Commerce. Just off the Texas coast sits a unique beach town marked with salty vibes and sun-soaked memories. Port Aransas is a place where family traditions unfold naturally, and beauty lies both in island views and the unhurried moments between adventures. One visit and you'll see why so many have anchored their traditions to the island way of life. Trade mountain peaks for 18 miles of uninterrupted shoreline and start your new favorite family tradition in Port Aransas, Texas. Go to visitportaransas.com and plan your visit. That's visitportaransas.com.
Today on CityCast Denver, one of the hottest debates in the city over the past few years is how to get to the airport. There's always traffic on Peña Boulevard, but the A-line is not the most reliable or accessible. So it's felt at times that expansion of the highway is inevitable. But then last week, a surprise. City Council postponed a vote on a $15 million contract to start work on the expansion plan. That came after Council President Amanda Sandoval said she got hundreds of emails about the issue and not one in support of the contract. So as DIA is planning for even more growth over the next 30 years, we're revisiting a conversation that me and our host Bree Davies had with Denver Post reporter John Murray to understand why getting to the airport is so frustrating and why this debate is so fraught. Today is Monday, March 10th. I'm Paul Caroli, and here's what Denver's talking about. John Murray, welcome back to CityCast Denver.
Thanks for having me.
Bree, of course, is here as well. Hey, Bree.
Hey, guys.
So, John, we're talking about another highway widening in Denver.
It's inevitable, isn't it?
Is it though, John?
Yeah, that's the question. Is
I mean,
it inevitable?
that's a good question. Is it seems like, so CDOT's not involved here with Peña Boulevard. They're not abandoning highway widenings, but they've been like, they got rid of one that was going to happen on I-25 through central Denver. So,
Yes, we actually just discussed that.
Yeah, just in the last year or two.
So something changing with these highway widenings. Not so popular as they once were, except perhaps this one we're going to talk about, Peña Boulevard. And I think we should start with where this idea even came from to widen it. Why is this happening now, John?
It's happening now because Denver International Airport opened in 1995. So yeah, it's nearing 30 years old. And in that time, obviously it's been growing quite a bit. Also in that time, there's been a lot of growth and development, like new subdivisions, shopping centers, employers, even like along the Peña Boulevard corridor. So it's just got a lot of traffic these days. I think it's something like 70% more than when it opened. And that first initial stretch, once you get off I-70, heading towards the airport, the first 6 miles there is still basically just 2 lanes each direction. They've been widening it closer to DIA, but at that point, once you get past E470, it's kind of more considered an airport access road because that's really all it serves. But once you're to the west of that, which is the part we're talking about today, it gets a little bit more complicated because it's not just serving DIA, it's also serving all these growing neighborhoods.
Right. Yeah, those growing neighborhoods we'll talk about in a second. But I got to tell you, my personal experience of Peña Boulevard, I have not noticed more traffic. I mean, It's always been kind of a low level. And that's how I get to the airport is I'll typically I'll get a ride share and go out there on Peña. Have you two, is this something you two are noticing? Is this bothering you?
I have. Since the A-line opened, I pretty much have managed to take that to and from the airport. I do drive every now and then, though, if I'm going out on assignment to
look at you, good person.
Well, I've also lived close to the A-line, so that helps. But when I've been out there, and when I was reporting on this story a couple weeks ago, I went out there and at 12:30 p.m. on a Thursday, the flyover ramp from I-70 to Peña wasn't quite as busy as it sometimes is. Sometimes even that'll back up onto I-70. But midday on a Thursday, you start to see taillights ahead of you going red, and it just gummed up in those 2 lanes and was backing up. And it wasn't a serious traffic jam that time, but if there's an accident, then it was
Yeah, it's kind of one of those spots where if there's an accident,
there's not a lot of room to go around, so it
changes
just
everything.
immediately backs up.
So, but the thing is, John, is like, we know that widening highways like doesn't work. I think the experts would say this. It's been studied. And the Denver Bicycle Lobby has called this proposed widening, quote, climate arson. And they said they want the money invested in bicycle infrastructure or the A-line. I mean, other ways to get there other than like the single occupant car, the ride share kind of thing. Why is that not the thing that's on the table or that we're talking about right now?
I think just the way that this has come forth is from DIA. And because DIA doesn't oversee the A-line, doesn't oversee RTD, it's had, obviously interaction with them in the past. It helped pay for some of the A-line initially. But since then, it just kind of has a hands-off approach. Like the transit's great. We encourage people to take it. But as far as if it's going to be upgraded, then that's up to RTD. So because they do have direct control over a good stretch of Peña and kind of majority control, because it's mostly airport traffic over the rest of Peña, that sort of has been their default of like, it's our access road, we just need to expand it.
Because it's what they can do.
Right.
And they have this need because they're so busy.
Correct.
And you explained to me at one point why it's so complicated, like what the airport can spend money on and what it can't spend money on. How does that relate to this? Like
the airport, I make the joke sometimes that the airport prints money. It has so many things that it collects fees from out there, like parking, $200-something million last year. All the things that get tacked on to your plane ticket, a lot of that goes to the airport. So it brings in, I think it's something like $1 billion a year. But there are restrictions from the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, on what airports can spend their money on. And it's basically, running an airport. You can't use the airport and siphon the money out for other uses in the city. So Peña Boulevard, because a study puts the airport share of the traffic on there at about maybe every 3 in 4 cars, 73%, that's the percentage of any cost that the airport can pay. The rest has to come from local government or federal grants or other sources because that's the share of local traffic using it.
This feels like such a weirdly stupid modern problem to me.
How so? What do you mean?
We're an airport. We have money for some things that benefit us, but not everything. Like, why is it not mutually beneficial for the city and the airport to share some of this cost burden for public transportation? Because it's not just travelers, right? It's a lot of working folks that make this airport work.
Yeah, and a lot of the airport employees do rely on the A-line to get to work.
Absolutely. It just feels like such a, we can pay for a highway, but we're not going to pay for a train. I don't know.
Well, we did pay for a train. We paid for the A-line. We have this A-line.
Do we want to
like
talk about the A-line?
We should talk about the A-line.
Do we want to talk
it's
about
10 years old or something.
It opened in 2016.
Yeah, I was
It's
like,
not even 10
I was
years
like,
old.
Paul, it's not as old as the 30-year-old airport. That's how long it took us to even get a train there, which should be an embarrassment to me, frankly. Anyway.
And it runs right along Peña Boulevard.
Yes.
The same
It's pretty
track.
parallel,
It serves
yeah.
the same purpose, get people to the airport. And yet, for some reason, it's not solving this problem. It's not, and it's not the thing that we want to invest in.
Yeah.
So why is that, John?
Well, I think if you look at from the standpoint, so for the article, I interviewed Kevin Flynn, who's a city council member. He worked for RTD when the A-line was built. He was actually the communications manager for that project. So he was nothing if not a booster for the A-line. However, he lives in Southwest Denver, which is what he represents on the council. And he actually told me this wasn't in the story. Before the pandemic, he made the effort of taking a bus to the W line, connecting downtown to the A line, and would make that like kind of 3-pronged transit trek out to the airport, which took hours. But he makes the point that, like, which is true, that the A line serves a good chunk of the metro area, but not by all means all people. And connecting to it is not often easy if you live far from that corridor. So it's just not a reasonable option for a lot of people to get to and from the airport.
This was like what was going through my mind when I was reading those comments from him, because like you said, he represents Southwest Denver, like Bear Valley. That's where my in-laws live, basically in Bear Valley. That is literally the farthest you could possibly be within like the Denver metro from the airport. Mm-hmm. And my thought was, wouldn't he love to drastically improve his own constituents' ability to take public transportation? Maybe not. I don't know. It just felt like that to me would be a push as a council person to say, we got to make this better. But in the short term, highways tend to do that faster, right?
Yeah,
I don't know.
The highway is the easier solution here for sure.
it feels like it was kind of like set up, not to fail, but like if they wanted to run more service, it would probably be a problem. Do you think that we're just like stifling that ability already to make public transit
That was
the
one
option?
of the big compromises made a decade ago. It was really around 2011 when so RTD, they were facing all these cost overruns and estimates on the fast tracks lines that voters had approved back in 2004. And so the East line, as it was called then, which became the A line, it became this public-private partnership where these private partners came in and said, okay, you think you're several $100 million short of being able to build this. We can do the A line and what turned out to be also the G line and the B line, the ones that go to Wheat Ridge and up to Westminster. We can do all those and within the amount that you have to spend. But here are some changes we have to make. And one of them was 2 sections of the A line single tracking it. So that literally does mean that an eastbound train heading out towards the airport, it goes past on one of those sections. There's 5 miles of these. And obviously a train going the other direction can't go on that section at that time. So that limits how often you can run trains, right? And they also have to coordinate to make sure. Now, right now, at most, it runs every 15 minutes. And that is within the threshold of what they can, just as long as they're on schedule. And you'll notice sometimes if you're leaving the airport and the train leaves a few minutes late, or there's track work somewhere, it has to stop at a station for a few minutes to get everything back coordinated.
If they tried to even just increase frequency, it would be too hard to sort of manage.
Right now they basically can't.
Okay.
So it's probably $100 million plus to double track one of the bigger of the 2 sections, which would be the more impactful one if you want to increase the frequency of trains. So that's something that's in consideration here too, that if somebody were to push, like Johnston were to push and work with RTD to increase A-line frequency, you'd have these hard costs that you'd have to invest to be able to do that.
Because it's just physically limited by the infrastructure currently.
Right.
This episode is brought to you by 5280 Magazine. Calling all Denver area brunch lovers, 5280 Magazine's annual brunch event is just a few weeks away. Have you bought your tickets yet? The 5280 brunch event is on Saturday, March 29th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Asterisk in Rhino. Guests will be treated to an afternoon jam-packed with sweet and savory brunch menus from editor-picked restaurants, plus tasty beverages including zero-proof options, a build-your-own Bloody Mary station, a dynamic DJ set from DJ Mr. Groove, and so much more. Seriously, have you read any of 5280's food coverage? These people know brunch. And they know that brunch is best enjoyed with friends. That's why they have a specially priced group ticket option for groups of 4 or more. Simply choose the GA ticket type brunch crew to redeem. Get your tickets now at 5280.com and tell them Bree sent you. Mimosas.
This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
Let's talk about the politics a little bit, because you said that DIA would be funding most of it, but the rest would be coming from the city of Denver?
Yeah, well, it could be the city of Denver. It could be for the larger project, which if that happens, the estimates are about $277 million in total costs. That's not cheap, right? DIA would again, be on the hook for about 3/4 of that, not quite. And then the local contribution, it could be more federal funding, could be sinking big grants from CDOT, from the feds, or it could be, a bond election in Denver or asking Aurora and several jurisdictions to help since they're right near Peña Boulevard too.
The vote question is interesting. Do you think that if this was put to a citywide vote, what do you think?
That's a good question.
I don't know. I don't want to be like, how do you think Denver would vote?
My gut says it would
wonder.
pass, probably, but I think that there would be a really spirited campaign about it because there's a lot of advocacy against it already.
Well, let's talk about the one guy whose opinion on this maybe makes more of a difference than anyone else's, our mayor, Mike Johnston. We asked him about this exact issue on the campaign trail, and he told us the same answer he gave to Sam Brash at CPR, where he said, quote, he doesn't think widening Peña Boulevard is our best immediate answer. He thinks what we want to do instead is look at how we increase ridership on public transit out there.
And as a matter of fact, as I was reporting, I went back and listened to that episode of CityCast to see what he said about it.
So what do you think now? I mean, and now that we're actually like making the decision.
I asked him again about it after this article came out last week. I was at a press conference for a new Ireland flight that DIA was announcing. And of course, it's the first international flight announced during Johnston's term. And so he was there kind of cheerleading with it. So I asked him afterwards about Peña Boulevard, and he kind of reiterated a similar thing. He wants to wait and see what DIA's current plan that they're putting together, taking into account like what the growth looks like, what the needs are, and then recommending what to do. But he did reiterate that he'd like to see improvements to transit as a way to move more people before we look at highway widening.
I, in general, am trying to look for as many alternatives as we can to putting more cars on the road and more vehicle miles traveled on the road. And so getting people to use public transit more, including the A-line to the airport or A-line stops on the way out.
So, John, you've mentioned a few times the growth in the area around Peña Boulevard. So we're talking about Green Valley Ranch and that like northern Aurora area. So you reported that there's nearly 35,000 housing units planned for construction out there right now. And that's in addition to the huge new Pepsi plant you mentioned. And as we learned last week, possibly Elitch Gardens 3.0.
Possibly.
Yeah. So how does all that development fit into this debate over potentially widening the boulevard?
And I'll clarify that 35,000 housing units, that's just in Aurora.
Just in Aurora. So that's not Green Valley Ranch.
That area, Green Valley Ranch, is on the very kind of eastern border of Denver, rather, and then like the boundary with Aurora kind of snakes around up there. So we're talking about both jurisdictions here, and it's
even more housing.
Yeah, tens of thousands, and in the next 25 years or so, just within 5 miles of Peña Boulevard, the number of people living there is expected to double. And then you're also getting the thing that shouldn't be discounted is employer growth. So you mentioned Pepsi up on DIA property. A Coke affiliate is going to build a replacement for their Denver plant up there.
A slightly smaller one than the Pepsi plant.
Right.
But yes.
You're a Pepsi person. I forget this.
I sure am, John.
I had it at lunch today and I was let down. So you have Coke and Pepsi that'll be up there. United Airlines is like they're kind of maxing out on their pilot training center in the old Stapleton Airport area in Central Park. So they just bought a whole bunch of land up there near the 61st and Peña station that they're going to be building on for their training capability. Like there's just employers everywhere. And so the number of jobs is even supposed to skyrocket out there. And remember, that's traffic too, right? So theoretically, DIA could, on some of the stuff up there near the boundary, build some like circulator buses and things like that. But a lot of those folks ain't going to be taking transit. And so that just adds to Peña.
Well, but isn't that
the trucks too?
Isn't that the question we're talking about right now? Is like, what kind of transit are those communities going to need?
Right.
Like, what's that conversation sound like, and how does that relate to Peña Boulevard?
Separately, the city of Denver has been doing area plans, neighborhood plans up there. They're doing a travel study right now, kind of working with DIA's Peña study to look at travel needs in that area. And their report to Johnston from the transition last month recommended kind of a both and scenario where like we realize that transit could be the main mode of transportation for most people to get to DIA, but it's not going to serve everybody. So they kind of recommend both, maybe a responsible widening of the highway in some way, and we need to boost transit too, so that way it better serves kind of everybody.
So it feels like there's a lot of players here. There's DIA, there's the Johnston administration, the city. There's constituents, I would say, voters as well, advocacy groups. I'm just thinking about, especially like in Green Valley Ranch, if these folks are mobilizing. But who's going to decide what path we ultimately choose for this widening of Peña or not?
I mean, there's a reason that, DIA is sort of steering the car at this point, but there's a reason people are lobbying Mayor Johnston, because the CEO of DIA is appointed by the mayor. It's not like the mayor day-to-day tells them how to run the airport. But on major policy questions, the mayoral administration sets the tone and kind of decides the direction. So, it's smart of folks to lobby Johnston on this because he ultimately will help decide or direct, like, hey, we're going to go in this direction as a city, as an administration, when the key decisions are made.
Well, what's your sense of it? You've talked to Johnston about this. You've reported on the airport for years and years. What do you think is the most likely outcome here? It's
hard to predict because I think, you mentioned the outset, it's 2023. I think the tides are changing a lot on these big transportation questions, but not as fast as some advocates for alternatives would like. But I would say maybe in 2023, a highway project to an airport still probably has the edge.
Well, sounds like Mayor Johnston's got a big decision ahead of him. Wish him a lot of luck with that. Figure it out.
I don't know if I feel any better about this after this conversation, John.
Me neither. Me neither. Well, John Murray, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, guys.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed the show, why not take a minute to tell whoever at DIA picks the voices on the train about us, rate the show wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to our morning newsletter, and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See you then. Welcome to the Denver International Airport. We hope you enjoy your stay in the Mile High City. We've got beautiful tall mountains, crispy craft beer, and all the traffic you could possibly dream of. Hold on, please. You'll get there eventually. Bong, bong, bong. Welcome. I could do this all day.